was setting up the jack-o'-lanterns. He was a friendly guy. There was never any doubting that. I never was saying he wasn't. I explained the issue and he listened intently, his blue glass eyes staring almost through me, but he nodded like he heard me nonetheless. He said a few other people had told him the exact same thing as I had. But he fixed the fences over the summer so that would not ever be a problem again. Okay, perfect. Great. Besides, he told me with a smile, last year was just a test run. This Halloween, everything is going to be just perfect. On Halloween, the jack-o'-lantern field looked even better than it had the year before. I mean, even though the arrangement was the same, I just can't put my finger on it. Ruben had hired some artists to collaborate and create fully monstrous designs for the pumpkins. They were awesome. I couldn't believe it. I did a walkthrough by myself before the candles were lit, just to take it all in, all of it in. I felt like a kid again. I did. As the evening was coming to a close and we'd given out the majority of our candy to the neighborhood children, we were getting ready to turn off the lights. Lock up when we heard sirens approaching. I looked outside and saw a procession of police cars and fire engines and ambulances heading towards us. I stepped out onto the porch and watched as they passed our house and took the sharp left into the driveway of Ruben's farmhouse. I sat on the steps with my wife and watched as lights were flipped on and the field was partially illuminated. Oh my God. I whispered. In the harsh overhead lights, I saw bodies on the ground among the glowing jack-o'-lanterns. Small ones, small costumed ones, kids. Oh my God, I repeated louder. Paramedics and rescue officials descended onto the field and worked to resuscitate the still lifeless bodies. One by one, they gave up. Parents are arriving in droves, and the sounds of wailing and hysteria, the cries of mothers filled the air, the hearts breaking, fathers yelling, kneeling down, and just, it was heartbreaking, absolutely heartbreaking. weeks later, the air was still thick with flies and bees and bugs of all kinds. We still hadn't had a frost, and things that crawled and flew feasted on the pulpy remains of the jack-o'-lanterns. From the house I could see their deformed, hideous faces. Faces which no longer evoked a feeling of holiday fun. They were faces that mocked the dead. The incredibly warm autumn continued 20 degrees above average, according to the weather man in town. The flowers were blooming, and the cherry trees had blossomed a full five months ahead of time. The pumpkins were still there, but mostly formless, having succumbed to rot in the ravenous of vermin. So, as the hot November slouched into December, the luckiest of us had started to forget slowly about the tragedy. It's funny how the brain works that way. But we still got reminders, especially on December 2nd when Reuben broke silence. My cousin Ron works for the police department as a mechanic. He doesn't have any access to criminals or official information, but he talks to cops a lot. And the cops like to talk. Yeah, the cops, they love to talk. Ron came over the second before any news had gotten out about what Reuben was actually saying. It was clear he was comfortable in his chair, but his demeanor was uncomfortable. Lillian and I sat and listened while Ron relayed what his buddy had learned from the detective. Reuben, I knew nothing, was like the man being described by my cousin. He'd blanketed himself with cuts and scars of indecipherable symbols and words. Every inch of his flesh was carved or mutilated in one way or another. Something he'd done with his fingernails over the course of time. He was in jail. The detectives learned that Reuben was ready to talk. Yep. When he began to scream the names of each dead child just after midnight on the second, he shouted each first, middle, and last name until his voice was hoarse. What in the world? What in the world is going on here? The main takeaway was a date and time. Detectives stood on the other side of his cell and transcribed what he said. They didn't understand most of it, but it was better than nothing, I guess. December 5th, 11 p.m. No one could figure out what he meant by it. So there was a lot of speculation. All the police could do was park a unit over by the farm overnight, just in case he had something planned. On the 5th, I sat with Lillian and Ron on the front porch and stared at the backfield in front of us. 11 o'clock came and nothing happened. We waited for a few minutes. I saw the cop across the street standing next to his car, smoking a cigarette. As we were getting ready to go inside, I saw something flicker in the field. Hey, I yelled to the cop and kept pointing to the field as more flickers came into view. The cop snuffed out his cigarette and walked around the barn to take a look. He got officers who fired fell to the ground. They didn't move for a second, but then they started to rot, just like the pumpkins. Other officers backed away. I'd backed all the way up to my house, and I watched from the doorway with my wife and cousin. We were horrified. A procession of children walked down the street, followed by police cars. Firefighters worked to put out the blazing field, and after a while they'd succeeded. The children have reached the prison. The children have burned the cell of Reuben Rendell. The children are carrying Rendell back the way they came. was pale as paper, lips blue, eyes wide and glassy, like he wasn't all there. Snow clung to his coat in heavy clumps, and he was shaking as hard as teeth were clacking together. God, I said before I even thought about it. He didn't answer, didn't even look at me. He just stood there trembling in the doorway, like he didn't know where he was. I should have hesitated. I should have asked what he was doing out in such a blizzard, who he was, how he got up here. But I didn't. Out of instinct. I just closed the door. If I closed the door, he would die out there. I'd never be able to live with myself. So that part of me that used to be a husband, the part of me that could have been a father, one day it's still there somewhere, even if it's quieter now. Come on in, I said. Come on in, let's get you warm. He stepped inside without a word. The wind slammed the door shut behind him. He had left a trail of melting snow behind him as I led him to the fire, his boots soaked through. I had him sit on the old armchair by the hearth while I threw a couple logs on and got the flames high. I asked if he was hurt. He didn't answer. Can you talk? I tried. Again, tell me your name. Still nothing. Just that 1,000-yard stare, like he was looking through the fire, past it into something else. Like he saw something I couldn't. He looked like hell, skin pale, tight over the bone, lips cracked, nose bleeding just a little from the cold. I knelt down beside him to check for the frostbite, and that's when I saw it. On his side, just below the ribs, his jacket torn and shirt soaked with blood, was a wound. A deep bite, ragged, raw, and already turning dark on the edges. It was not new, a day or two old, maybe more. The skin around it was red and hot. Did you say you were bit? I muttered to myself, more to myself than him. He flinched when I touched it. His eyes snapped to mine wild just for a second, then they were vacant again. It didn't look like a wolf bite. I've seen those before. Hell, I've seen a lot worse. Back when I hunted more often, wolves tear, rip, pull. This is cleaner. Too clean. I patched it up as best as I could. I cleaned it, wrapped a gauze tight around his ribs. He winced but didn't make a sound. He just watched me, breathing shallow like a cornered animal. press my ear to the door, listening, but nothing. Every instinct in me said walk away, let it be. The boy had been through hell. Maybe he needed time. Maybe he was sick. Maybe he just broke the mirror by accident. Maybe I was imagining things again, but my gut had gone cold and it wasn't from the storm. I wrapped my hand around the knob. It was slick with condensation and turned it slowly, quiet as I could, until the latch gave way with a soft click. Then, holding my breath, I gently opened the door. What I saw inside shook me to the core. The kid was split open vertically down the middle, bisected with a horrific precision that ran from the crown of his head through his nose, mouth, and sternum, all the way to his groin. The bathroom looked like a butcher's block, and tile flooded underneath is stained with something dark and moist. His two halves rested on the floor like broken mannequins, separated by sickening foot of space. Ribs, stark white and splintered, jutted like snapped fences. Muscles, still glistening and unnervingly pink, hung in strips. The coiled lengths of intestine and the dull, spilled organs lay exposed and motionless on the floor, some still clinging to one half of the body. There was an emptiness where his spine could have been, a hollowed out canyon running through his core. It was as if something massive had forced its way out from the inside. The precision of the split through the bone and gristle was alien. Wrong. The small bathroom window, usually sealed tight against the mountain air, was shattered. Not just cracked, but exploded outward, as if something had been excited and jumped through it. Jagged shards of glass glittered on the still sill and floor. The fierce wind howled through the camp, bringing with it a stinging spray of snow. And from the half of the young man's body that was closer to the window, a trail began. A glistening, repulsive path of black and dark red slime snaked across the pristine white tiles, past the gurgling toilet, over the shattered glass, and through the broken window frame, disappearing into the white void of the blizzard. I thought it was blood, but it was thick, viscous, and seemed to pulsate faintly in the dim light, leaving an oily sheen in its wake. Whatever had been inside him, whatever had ripped him apart and then fled, had left this horrifying signature. I finally found my breath. It was cold, and I panic gasped that taste of iron and that strange stink coming off the floor. I backed away. Slowly, I backed away, never taking my eyes off the split halves of once was a human, never off the black and red trail that snaked across the tiles. Every instinct screamed, run. Why didn't I? I'll never know. Not down the mountain, of course. I'd never make it. But away from this room. It was out there. Something that skin to crawl through a broken window into a night that would kill anything normal. The thought of it sliding down the mountain, of it reaching the small, defenseless town I'd just driven through days ago, made adrenaline surge through paralysis. I couldn't make it to town, not on my watch. My feet moved before my brain gave the order. I didn't bother closing the bathroom door. The horror had already escaped. Oozing into the other room, I moved past the living room where the cozy glow of the dying fire felt like a cruel joke, and into the master bedroom. I went straight to the closet tucked behind my winter gear, right where I always kept it. A Remington 870. I pulled it out, the cold steel of the pump action a familiar weight to my hands. I grabbed the box of double-locked buckshot from the shelf, spilling a handful of crimson shells onto the carpet, but I didn't stop to pick them up. I loaded the shotgun quickly, the sharp metallic squeak, squeak of the shells cutting through the roar of the wind. It had been years since I'd pointed a gun at anything that wasn't a deer, but looking at that slick, dark trail leading out of my house, I knew this wasn't hunting something human, not even a living being. This is stopping something that was already dead, something that had worn death, then shed it. I wasn't a hero, I was just a widower with a cabin, a shotgun, and a terrifying realization. If I was the last line of defense, the storm that had trapped me had trapped it too on the mountain. I held the shotgun steady, my knuckles white. The wind howled outside and the trees creaked. I checked the hall one last time, glanced at the horror show of the bathroom, and then moved towards the front door. There was no plan. Nope, none. There was only the gun in my hands, worry in my heart, and the knowledge that something so sinister, malevolent, was crawling through the snow towards civilization. I flipped the deadbolt and hit the door with my shoulder. The wind was a physical blow, a sudden blinding white sheet that stole my breath and stung my eyes. The roar of the storm swallowed the world around it. It was a complete whiteout. My eyes searched frantically for the trail. The front porch was already buried under a fresh drift, but I knelt down, shielding my face against the immediate sting of the snow. There it was, still outside the bathroom window on the other side of the perimeter. The oily black and crimson slime was already freezing, but it had been buried. Clean snow with clean snow. It had not been buried, yet it was distinct, lying on the otherwise clean snow. Like spilled ink. It didn't just drip, it looked like something had slithered. I followed it, sinking immediately into the drifts, up sudden heavy gust when I saw it. At first, I thought it was a buck driven mad by the storm. It was easily that size, too low to the ground, though its dark shape barely discernible. In the whirling vortex of snow where the cabin's clearing met the forest edge. But it didn't move like a deer. It didn't trot. It didn't bound. It scuttled. It was hunkered down. Its massive body creaking a brief moment of stillness in the blizzard. A small black shadow against the white flurry. I stopped dead, sinking deeper into the drift. I raised the gun, pushing the safety off with a click, dry, click, click, click. Through the shifting veil of snow, I strained to make out the details, and the details I found were strange. the snow began to sift down, not from the storm, but from the branches above. Chunks of snow fell, followed by a sudden heavy thud just yards away. It had dropped down. The creature was on the ground again, but now it wasn't scrambling away, it was waddling. A fast, deliberate load to the earth movement like a massive, glistening insect trying to appear harmless. Its bulk seemed even more immense, now that it was no longer distorted by the heights, and I could hear the wet squelching around its many appendages on the snow. It moved slowly into the small clearing around my hiding spot. I was pressed so tightly against the frozen roots that the wood dug painfully into my spine, but I didn't dare flinch. I had already positioned the Remington. My shooting hand gripped the trigger, the barrel angled slightly up and out toward the opening of the root cave. Resting against the snow-covered ground, the creature's movement was erratic, darting toward the tree line one moment, then pulling back. Why hasn't it found me? Then I realized it wasn't looking for me. Its massive, misshapen head was constantly sniffing the air, lifting and twisting with jerky movements. The air was thick with a howling blizzard and the scent of damp pine and frozen earth. The storm was masking my scent. The wind and the heavy blowing snow were scattered and nullifying my presence, covering the fresh trace of gunpowder and adrenaline. I was lucky. The storm had become my unintentional ally. After a few minutes, the sniffing paid off. The waddling ceased, and its massive, slimy hair form turned directly towards my root cave. It approached the gap between the thick roots, filling the dark space with its bulk. It was so close I could feel the minute vibrations of its weight disturbing the ground. And then its head lowered. The snow cleared just long enough for me to see the details I hadn't been able to discern in the blizzard. Its head was roughly the size of a buck or moose skull, but hideously wrong. The bone structure was too broad, too blunt, and I had no discernible eyes. It had no discernible eyes, just wide swaths of slick, wet flesh, the color of old, dried blood. It wasn't just fur that covered it. Its thick, dark hair was matted with slime, forming a repulsive, heavy mane. Interspersed within his mane was a horrifying number of short, glistening, leech-like appendages that writhed slightly in the cold air, tasting and searching. Then it was inches from my face. I could smell the metallic stench of the black slime mixed with the sour, coppery odor of raw meat. I was looking into the mouth of the nightmare that had walked out of a man. One of the slick, worm-like appendages started out, brushing against the tip of my nose. In that instant, it knew. The thing recoiled slightly, and its large, blunt head drawing back. The wet flesh of its face tightened into an expression of immediate, primal recognition. The meal was found, the obstacle identified. It was about to strike. I didn't let it. I drove the barrel of the Remington up and sideways, the muzzle nearly touching the side of its monstrous head. The blast was muffled and wet and awful, contained thunder. The buckshot tore into the creature's skull from below, and the thing erupted. A horrifying geyser of black slime, wet fur, and bone fragments sprayed into the roots above me. The creature massive muscular tremor before its great weight collapsed. It didn't follow me, thank God, but it landed directly outside my hiding spot, completely blocking the entrance. I lowered the gun, the noise of the ringing in my ear louder than the wind. I was trapped beneath a mountain of steam, reeking horror. The ringing in my ears faded slowly, replaced by the sickening sound of hot, wet matter sizzling on the frozen snow. I was entombed. The creature's immense cooling mass was pressed up against the root system, sealing the entrance to my makeshift bunker. I could hear the wind now, muffled by the sheer volume of dread, dead, hairy flesh. I lowered the hammer on the shotgun slowly, ever so slowly, my entire body ricocheting with shivers. A delayed, violent reaction, I suppose. The smell was overwhelming right now. A blast of copper, sulfur, and sour stink of the creature's decaying slime. The muzzle of the Remington was coated in gore. I had to get out. If the blizzard kept up, I'd be trapped here, beneath the rotting carcass until the spring melt. I shoved the shotgun's barrel against the creature's flank, testing the weight. No movement. It was like pushing a felled log, waterlogged oak tree. I shifted my weight, reaching with my free hand, and finally found the edge of the root that had protected me. I pressed my shoulder against the dirt wall and pushed, straining. The corpse moved an inch, then sank back. I had to figure out a different way. I turned the shotgun around and used the thick, heavy butt of the stock to scrape away the dirt and packed snow behind me. Burrowing deeper into the root system, the ground was hard and frozen, but the shotgun butt gave me just enough leverage to widen a small, cramped gap between the two lateral roots. Gasping, I barely squeezed through the opening. I emerged on the far side of the massive pine, away from the creature's bulk. I stood up slowly, my heartbeat pounding in my temples, and I walked back over to look at the kill. It lay motionless, its multi-limbed body contorted awkwardly on the snow, but something was wrong. Where the head had been, there was only a ruin of black fur and a pulped bone, yet a thin, milky white stream was rising from the wound, and then I noticed the blood, or lack of it. It wasn't bleeding out. The dark, black-red slime was only slowly oozing, congealing almost immediately in the bitter cold. The gunshot had caused massive trauma, but the creature's internal volume seemed insufficient for its size. It felt like I had shot a sack of thick fluid rather than a complex biological organism. My eyes caught something in the creature's massive flank where the first blast of the buckshot had hit. The matted fur had been stripped clean, revealing the skin beneath it, pale, slick, and thin, stretched tight over the enormous frame. The skin was visibly healing, slowly knitting itself together. The gaping holes from the shot before it was fully healed and functional again. I had to get back to the cabin, not just for ammunition, but for something heavier, something more final. I turned and ran like a madman, the snow swallowing my footing, the low branches whipping my face. The familiar track back to the cabin was a blur of white and black, driven by the cold fear that the monster would simply stand up by me. I burst through the door, slamming it shut, throwing the deadbolt, though I knew a simple piece of metal could not hold that thing for long. I raced past the silent horror of the bathroom and into the storage closet. I didn't grab the deer rifle. A bullet was a coin toss, but fire was a guarantee. Tucked behind the winter tires were two red 5-gallon jerry cans, one for the snowmobile and one for the backup generator. I grabbed the can of kerosene too. It would burn slower and hotter than gasoline, and I yanked it out. was already beginning to recede, fighting a losing battle against the continuous onslaught of the blizzard. I stood for a moment, letting the sheer exhaustion wash over me before the pragmatism and determination of the mountain man kicked in. The fire was dying, and what was left of the thing couldn't be allowed to heal or even to rot here. I grabbed the heavy kerosene can and emptied the last of its contents onto the smoldering pile, coaxing the flames back into a furious, consuming roar. I moved the equipment inside, then returned to the blazing carcass with my axe. It took a sickening 15 minutes of hacking, separating what was left of the creature's bulk. I dragged the black, escaping chunks through the snow and tossed them back into the heart of the blaze. The air was thick with stench, that terrible smell of burning flesh, but it was different, worse, inhuman. Not any animal I have ever smelled. I was purging the mountain of this evil. When I was done, only a patch of melted snow and a few glowing embers remained. I stood at the fire, the axle handle cold in my numb hands, watching the last of the embers fade into the furious white. I turned, intending to head back inside, locked the doors, and faced the grim reality of the split body in the bathroom. But that's when I heard it. It was the wind. Nope, it was not. And it wasn't the groan of the trees. It was a faint, wet, screaming wail, identical to the sound the creature had made when the buckshot first hit it. The sound of ripping canvas and tearing metal. It came from the same direction as the first time. In the depths of the tree lines from where the young man had come originally, I spun around, bringing the axe up like a shield, searching the blinding, swirling storm. My mind immediately went to the rifle, the thing I'd left behind so foolishly in the house. In my haste, I had nothing but a bloody, snow-covered axe and a dead fire. The pitch, the wail, the screaming came again, closer this time, high-pitched and choked. I took a step backward, preparing to fight, when a memory finally pierced the fog of panic. The young man's vacant eyes. The young man's story. Hiking. I was hiking with my girlfriend, Emma. Shit. That was good. That was really good. On to the next. Story number 3. By u/north_cliff. An horror creepypasta. My daughter. See, my daughter's missing, and I don't want to find her. I've always wanted to be a mother. I remember when I was in kindergarten, all the kids were supposed to share what they wanted to be when they grew up. Most kids said things like firefighter, astronaut, doctor, cat doctor, etc. I said mother. My teacher, Miss Moss, told me I could be a mother as well as something else and urged me to pick another dream job. I honestly couldn't think of one, but because of all the other kids staring at me, I blurted out teacher. That made Miss Moss smile, but it made me feel bad because I knew I was telling a lie. I've always hated lying, but there I was. That's why I'm going boyfriend, Jack. I started birth control because I knew it was the responsible thing to do logically. I knew I was ready to be a mother, but I still couldn't help the feeling of despair that washed over me each time I swallowed another pill. Emotionally, it felt so wrong, putting the barrier between myself and my longest lifelong dream. Sometimes I'd even cry about it. These feelings became especially acute when Jack and I decided to get married. I wanted to start our family immediately, but Jack wanted to finish at university and get settled in our careers before talking about kids. I agreed that this was the logical thing to do. I kept swallowing those pills while pouring my longing into journals. I'd make lists of baby names, dream about who my child would grow up to be. Would they want to be a doctor or perhaps maybe an investigative journalist? I don't know, maybe their greatest desire would be to be a parent like I did. I followed mommy bloggers online, memorizing their tips and tricks so I'd be ready to be the best mommy ever, simultaneously wondering if my family would be as perfect as theirs. But I honestly wasn't looking for perfection. I just wanted to have a happy kid who would feel loved as their unique self. I knew whoever arrived, I was ready to love them to the stars and back. I was going to be the best mom. I knew it. I just knew I would be. Finally, Jack and I were ready to start a family, but it turned out to be harder than I'd expected. Much harder. Months turned into years, and every negative test hit like a knockout punch. It never got easier. It probably didn't help that I was still following those perfect mommy bloggers with their perfect families. So I started following others who were sharing about their fertility journeys, people who were struggling as much as we were. That helped me start sharing my own experiences. It felt good knowing that I wasn't alone. I felt like being a part of this amazing community of people I'd never met. Each time a fellow struggler finally found success, we all congratulated them joyfully, but alone. With Jack, I'd cry. I was tired of waiting for my turn. I know this wasn't only tolling on me. Jack was struggling too. One day, while I was crying in his arms, he asked if we aren't able to have kids, would a life with just the two of us be so bad? My silence hit him like a knife through the heart, and it was enough for both of us to understand my answer. Jack and I decided to use all our savings to finally try IVF. The process was tough, emotionally and physically. Injections, ultrasounds, waiting, but it all felt worth it to me. Then finally, it happened. I was pregnant. The world finally felt like it made sense to me. Jack and I were overjoyed. I felt like I was on fluffy white clouds. That was before I knew what was coming. We found out I was carrying a boy. We named him Oliver, but then during a routine ultrasound, everything changed. The technician's silence and the doctor's grave expression told us that we didn't want to hear. Something was terribly wrong. Those fluffy white clouds turned dark and stormy, surrounded me for the rest of the pregnancy. We knew our son wasn't going to live long after his birth, and in the end, one day was all we got with our perfect boy. I loved him to the stars and back, and I still do. I just wish I could have done something more to give him more time. I couldn't help but feel I had failed him as a mother. The next days, weeks, months passed in a haze of grief so heavy I didn't know we'd survive it. The nursery we'd so joyfully prepared now felt like a cruel joke. Silence felt deafening, and any noise was the wrong noise. I'd like to say that a relationship grew stronger through our shared grief, but it didn't. I wanted to start trying for another baby. I thought it would help us step forward out of the darkness we had felt trapped in. I thought it would be good for us to have something to look forward to, but Jack said he wasn't ready. savings. And it didn't take me long to get him to admit that. Actually, the main reason was that he was scared about having another sick child. Jack packed his bag to stay at a hotel for a night. He said he needed a bit of space, but he never moved back. Somehow, in the midst of all this, I found myself back online sharing my story. The responses poured in like honey. Messages of love and shared pain, messages I clung to with desperation as if each were a lifeline. I was in the bleakest part of my life, and those lifelines were essential. To make things even worse, I couldn't keep up with the mortgage, so I had to list our house for sale, and I shared all this to my followers. Now I wonder if I'd never shared anything online when my daughter even exists. I think it was because I shared my story. The New Genesis Institute found me. Maybe Dr. Hart did personally read my posts, or maybe an algorithm pointed them towards who they were looking for, a desperate woman who would give anything, do anything for a child. Now I don't know how they found me, but I know that Freya wouldn't exist without them. It was early on a Sunday morning when I received this email. We are thrilled to extend to you an invitation to participate in an exclusive opportunity at the New Genesis Institute, a private fertility clinic dedicated to pioneering the future of human health and wellness. After learning about your fertility challenges and the heartbreaking loss you've endured, we believe you are uniquely positioned to benefit from and contribute to the groundbreaking work at the New Genesis Institute. Your journey has resonated deeply with Dr. Evelyn Hart, whose mission is not only to support those facing struggles, but also to advance the science of preventative medicine for future generations. To access your official invitation, please first sign the required NDA, non-disclosure agreement. There was a link to the NDA. I was nervous about clicking anything. It looked legit, but was this some sort of horrible scam? By doing a quick search online, I learned that the New Genesis Institute was founded by Dr. Evelyn Hart, a billionaire philanthropist who had been funding health initiatives for years. There are hardly any photos of her. Dr. Hart appeared notorious for staying away from the public eye, but her name was credited on numerous science journals. She seemed super impressive. Dr. Hart had made her fortune early in her career when she innovated a disease testing device now used in clinics around the world. I finally felt something I hadn't in a long time. Excitement, hope, happiness, maybe. My heart started to beat fast in my chest. I decided to take the leap. I clicked the NDA. Heart racing now, I skimmed an extensive document, gleaning and what was meant to ensure that any and all information about the Institute remained strictly confidential. I signed it swiftly and pressed submit. Then I was taken to my official invitation. I'll share it with you here, and yes, I do realize I'm breaking my NDA, but I'm more than willing to risk all consequences to get this information out to everyone and anyone I can. Thank you for considering the New Genesis Institute. The founder of the new renowned Dr. Evelyn Hart. The New Genesis Institute is at the forefront of revolutionary research in preventative medicine, with a focus on creating healthier and stronger generations. response came quickly. I received an email with detailed instructions. A private car would pick me up on March 1st, followed by a flight to their facility. The email explained that the New Genesis Institute is located on a private island, a place that, from the photos in the email, looked more like a resort than a clinic. Towering palm trees and sparkling blue water surrounded white buildings that gleamed in the sunlight. It didn't seem real, but then again, no part of this whole situation felt real. It didn't bother me at the time that I couldn't find the Institute on a map, that they had detailed extreme secrecy in the NDA. Instead of being nervous, I preferred to embrace a dream that I wanted since childhood. Plus, it was perfect timing. I was looking for a rental starting March 1st. Everything was falling into place. I felt like I was winning the lottery. I let that high feeling carry me to March 1st. And then when it came, first time I felt true fear. What if this was all a scam? Or worse, a joke with someone playing on me? And if they were, why were they doing it? But the car arrived precisely at 1 o'clock, and it took me to an airport where I was welcomed into a private plane. Apart from the crew, there were 2 other people on board, Claire and Mariah. I learned that they were also going to participate in Dr. Hart's treatments. We got to know each other during the flight. Both trouble conceiving, the same story. Desperately wanting a family, all the same things I had felt. The plane landed in a pristine airstrip. We were greeted by a uniformed staff who smiled and greeted us as if they already knew us personally. Especially friendly staff member Lark took us all under her wing. She escorted us towards the main building where we were told we could be introduced to Dr. Hart. Touching my feet to the island, seeing those buildings, this is when things started to feel real. The facility looked amazing. There were little cottages dotted under a large main building. Lark told us that each of us would get our own cottage for the duration of our stay. Gardens weaved throughout. Lark explained that we were free to roam the grounds of the facility, but the north half of the island had eroding cliffs and that they were super, super dangerous. A border wall made a division between that part of the island and the facility, so as long as we didn't try to get over the wall, we'd be safe. Dr. Hart emerged from the main building to greet us. She was poised and magnetic, with piercing green eyes. They weren't unkind, but had a calculating quality to them. She seemed to be assessing us from the moment she laid eyes on us. She spoke with a measured confidence. "Oh, welcome. You've made the right choice. Come here. I promise you we can take excellent care of you." She urged us to explore the island and take time to get to know the other women we'd be going on this journey with. I learned there were 20 of us. Before we were permitted to start fertility treatment, we spent our days in group therapy sessions, sharing our stories, our hopes, our fears. We came from different backgrounds, different countries even, but we all shared a unique bond. Every one of us was single. We'd all suffered a tragic loss of a loved one, and we all had the seemingly impossible dream of motherhood. Bizarre, I think. In the evenings we'd wander the gardens or sit by the ocean. We'd often talk late into the night, bonding further over our excitement. But I realized Mariah, who had seemed so excited about this opportunity on a plane, was growing increasingly nervous about being on the island. She didn't want to talk process in detail. They would be using innovative science that combined traditional IVF with advanced genetic optimization techniques. She told us that she had made her fortune by diagnosing problems, but he wanted to fix them. You were selected, she said, because you understand the anguish that comes with seeing a loved one held back by nothing but their own biology. You want a better life for your child, your children. Not only will we be ensuring you conceive, we will also be ensuring your child has the strongest possible biological foundation. A healthier, brighter future of all humanity begins here. She spoke with vigor and convincing finality. She told us that if anyone is uncomfortable with proceeding, they were welcome to step out and they would fly us home. She also made it clear that choosing to stay would mean we'd be leaving with a child. That there was no question in my mind I was going to stay. All the other remaining women stayed. We all wanted to bring our babies home. The 14 of us then began treatment. Apart from numerous injections, it honestly felt like the best holiday I'd been on ever. We were so well cared for. We always had the best food to eat and massage therapy whenever we needed. The staff were amazing. In therapy, we were encouraged to see the health benefits of our children were receiving as the future of humanity. We felt good about contributing to a healthy new generation. Every single one of us became pregnant quickly. Regular scans and health checks told us our babies were growing well. I was told I was having a baby girl. I was in bliss, falling in love with my little baby girl who I'd yet to meet. She had strong kicks inside me, so I wanted a strong name for her. I named her Freya. I wondered if she would look like her brother. One night, Claire and I were sitting on the beach beneath the stars. Both our bellies had grown large by this time. I was stroking mine with love, but Claire just stared at hers. She made a grimace as her baby gave her a mighty kick. I could even see the press of the little foot against her stomach. Claire seemed troubled, her unusual, bright smile replaced by a shadow of doubt. Claire, what's wrong? Do you ever feel like there's something off about all this? She responded quietly, her voice barely audible over the waves. Off? No, I said quickly. But for some reason I had the intense feeling I was lying. I pushed that feeling down so deep because I didn't want to believe it. Now when I was so close to finally holding my baby girl in my arms. Do you understand the specific treatment they'd given us and our babies? Claire asked. I'm not a doctor or a scientist, I responded. I don't understand any of that technical stuff, but I know they know what they're doing. That's all that matters to me. But what if there's something, I don't know, wrong with our kids? Claire asked me, eyes filling with tears. Oh, don't be silly, there's nothing wrong. They've been monitoring them all so closely. We've been given the best food, massages, best treatment. I mean, what could be wrong? I smiled. I took her hand in mine and said reassuringly, I think it's just nerves. We've all been through so much to get here. Even as I said it, I wasn't sure if I was also lying to reassure her or myself. The next day, Claire was in therapy practically the whole day. When she met me for dinner, she had her usual smile back on her face. You're right, it was definitely just nerves. I mean, being a single parent mother, I just think I'm overreacting. I forgot how truly lucky I am to be a part of all this, how lucky my child is. Aren't we lucky? I nodded slowly and gave her a huge hug, squeezing her tightly. We were told that for the safety of us and our babies, that delivering a little early by C-section would be best. We received the delivery schedule. Claire was to be first. I hit 9 months pregnant and pretty stupid. But I was consumed with seeing what was over the wall. I climbed and climbed until I couldn't see. Rows of identical, simple gravestones. Hello, I heard a voice echoing from below the tree. I looked down to see Dr. Hart staring up at me. I hadn't heard her following me. When did she get here? It's best to be come down now, she said. I climbed down as carefully as I managed. What is that over there? I asked. We were told there were dangerous cliffs, but that's not true, is it? It's a cemetery, she told me. I never wanted it hidden, but there were those at the Institute who thought our facility would be more peaceful without it in view, healthier for mothers. Well, who are they? I mean, like, who are buried over there? I asked her, not really wanting to know the answer. Oh, in our line of work, pushing boundaries of science and human potential, there are moments of profound loss, she said. Not every story here has a perfect ending, my dear. The individuals memorialized there were part of this journey, an earlier part, just as you are now. They entrusted us with their dreams, their deepest hopes, and though the outcomes were not what we wished, their courage paved the way for the advancements we've made still loved my daughter, and I knew I still wanted to protect her. I trusted that the Institute would help her. They knew what they were doing right, I thought. I called Claire and told her that Freya would be joining Kyan at the boarding school. I wanted to tell her why, but I found I couldn't. I skirted around the truth, instead telling her that I truly believed they were both in the right place. Staff at the Institute gave me updates on Freya. I was told she was taken back to the island with the other Genesis children, or boarding school was set up. I was assured that they had the best teachers available. At first, the updates came regularly. The Institute staff told me that she was adjusting well to life among other children, and Freya would write me letters. We were able to keep up a connection at the beginning, but over time, the updates grew sparse. Then Freya stopped replying to my letters. When I tried to call, the staff were polite but evasive. Eventually, the communication stopped entirely. It had been 2 years since I last saw Freya. It terrified me when I wasn't able to contact anybody. I was desperate for a type of communication. What if Freya was hurt? I didn't know. What if she was dead? I wanted to go to the island, but I had no idea where it was. Claire urged me to leave it alone. She said it was best to just let the Institute take care of things. She reminded me what I told her. They know what they're doing. That's when the news broke. A staff member from the Institute, one of the survivors, she was the one that went to the media. When she was interviewed, I recognized her immediately. Lark. I remember how happy and kind she was welcoming us to the island. Now her face looked haunted. She shared the footage of the massacre. I hardly recognized the island when I saw it. It was no longer an oasis. CCTV footage captured what looked like scenes from a horror film. Bodies of staff members, ripped apart, lay strewn across the grounds. Multiple video angles all around the facility, all over the gardens. The footage showed Lark cowering by a group of Genesis children, pleading for her life. I say children because that's how I knew them, but they didn't look like children anymore. They looked like strong, young adults in their 20s. But I immediately recognized the person leading the group. It was Kyan. I scoured the faces for Freya, hoping with all my soul I wouldn't see her amongst these faces covered in blood, predator eyes gleaming with the hunt. But then I saw her, and she was there. My heart sank. But then, at the same time, it lifted. She was alive. My daughter, my baby girl, was alive. We'll let you deliver the message, Kyan told Lark. Humanity is. It's time, he said. We are the future. Then Kyan turned to speak directly to the CCTV camera. They thought they control us. They could control us, he shouted. They thought they were superior because they made us. No, we are stronger. We are faster. We are smarter. Humans are below us. Why should we bow to them? Why should we be caged? Those behind him cheered defiantly, including Freya. They all looked left. Lark left alive. They all turned and left. Lark left alive, shook with sobs. The CCTV footage then showed the children getting on boats and leaving the island. The news then showed how the island was swarmed by police and international investigators. Of course, I'm sure you've probably seen the bodies. Bodies were identified by Dr. Hard, who had funded the Institute. Because she was not among them. There is no evidence of where she could be. All other CCTV footage and Institute files appeared to have been destroyed. They are currently ready to start an extensive exhumation of the cemetery found north of the cemetery, part of the island. I've spent days and nights, all waking hours, combing through the news, desperate for any sign of my daughter, Freya. The attacks have now become widespread. It seems the children have probably split into smaller hunting groups. footage. Like many of you, I'm sure I ran to lock my door immediately. I was terrified. But then I unlocked it. Because truthfully, I want my daughter to return to me. I told you I wanted to tell you the truth. My daughter is missing and I want to find her. I want to wrap her in my arms and keep her safe. I love her to the stars and back. I want her to be happy. That's all I've ever wanted. That's what a good mommy does, right? And I'll be completely honest with you now because I hate telling a lie. I'm not sure what lengths I will go to make sure she's happy. But I want to make sure good people aren't hurt, killed, eaten. Not when there are bad people out there. If my daughter needs meat, needs blood, there's no reason for her to feed on good people. I don't want you to be eaten, I promise you that. Because you're a good person, right? Good people shouldn't die. I know you are. My daughter is missing, but I don't want you to find her. I can find more suitable food for her, I promise. I hope you all have enjoyed these 3 creepy